Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast, where we explore personal development, spirituality, and science. I'm your host, Chris Ashley. I'm really excited for my guest today. We are going to talk all about health habits and how to make them really fun. But first, a couple quick announcements. If you head over to the links in the show notes, you're going to find all sorts of information. You will find ways to sponsor the podcast. You'll find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. You'll find links to courses and free downloads and free masterclasses and all sorts of goodies. So head over to the link tree, head over to the links in the show notes. And of course, you'll also find notes for all of my fabulous guests that I have. All right, so speaking of guests, let's introduce our guest today. So with me, I have Sandhya Gokal. And Sandhya is a pharmacist and healthy eating nutrition coach dedicated to making healthy eating so fun it becomes a superpower. She has 12 years experience working in the field of nutrition, supporting people in areas such as sustainable weight loss and improving blood sugars, as well as women's health. So welcome, Sandhya. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here too. And we're going to talk. I want to know how you marry these two worlds of pharmaceuticals and holistic nutrition eventually. But first, I want to ask you the question that I ask every single guest. The first question is, what is your origin story? So, what is it that led you to want to become this coach that makes everything so fun and gamifies it?
Okay. So actually when you said origin story, in my head popped like this adventure and all this really cool music. So that,
That's why I
I'm just
love
gonna
it, right? It reminds me of like Marvel or something.
So when I started out in 2019, I actually got diagnosed with pre-diabetes. And at that time, I was a pharmacist already. And when I got diagnosed with pre-diabetes, I got a little ashamed because as a healthcare professional, I felt like I really should be practicing what I preach. And so I decided to make a complete change of my eating habits to see if I could reverse the pre-diabetes without medication. And I actually managed to do it and make it like really sustainable. And that actually led me very much into the health coaching because this was the first time I'd made such a big healthy eating change, made it sustainable, and like a big part of that was working on the mindset. So for the like 12 years I've been a pharmacist, I have worked with so many people on things like weight loss, reversing diabetes, and just general like health habits. But in that 15 minutes to 30-minute conversation, we didn't spend a lot of time on mindset and how the mind and how your beliefs really affect your eating habits. And so what I'd see day after day is people would come into this journey and then at some point they would reverse and go back to what they were doing before. And so that's where I actually became a health coach, because I really wanted to marry the two. I really wanted to look at what was underlying all those eating habits and bring a more holistic view to how I dealt with people and I guess help people in their journey. Like my main goal as a pharmacist was really just to see that change. And it just gives me such a great feeling of pleasure to see someone make that change sustainably. So yeah, that's my origin story and how I ended up marrying the two as well, actually.
Well, it was full of adventure, so I think you did good job. Okay, so I'm sure people's first question is, what eating habits did you change that allowed you to reverse that prediabetes?
So the biggest one is I stopped thinking about food as a restriction when I was looking at changing my eating habits. And I think this is something that is gaining a lot more traction nowadays, which is amazing. But just removing that idea that food is good or bad and that I had to restrict in order to make this change made all the difference. In fact, I actually, for the first week that I made this change, remember eating ice cream every single day and actually feeling like you have to eat the ice cream. This is not a choice. And that just almost changed the entire journey, because taking away that idea of restriction, um, and in like within my eating habits, just kind of made it so much more, I guess, wide open, like first of all, you weren't really thinking about, oh my gosh, I can't eat this, I can't do that. You felt like you were coming from a place of abundance. And that was for me such a big thing because I love food and I love eating. So that was one of the big, I guess, superpowers that I developed along the way. Another one that I found really, really useful was just taking it really slow. And sometimes what happens with people on like eating journeys and changing habits, even any health habit really, is because health is such a big part of life. Like if you have health, you're really winning quite well at life. People think that it's all or nothing. And so what ends up happening is, I know with me particularly, I start feeling really overwhelmed and I start feeling like I have to do all these things. And then what ends up happening is I get overwhelmed and I do nothing. So this time I ended up just taking it super slow. My goal, like my actual rule for my healthy habits and getting that, like all those routines into place, was just to make something super small, so small that when I was going to do it, it just felt laughable that I couldn't. Like it felt ridiculous that I could not do some of those goals. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say I'd love an
yeah,
example.
adding like one extra vegetable to one meal a day was one of my first actions that I took, and that is not a hard thing to do when you think about it. Like one extra vegetable could be, an extra piece of lettuce in your sandwich, an extra piece of carrot in whatever meal you're making. So it's not a hard change to make, and the idea that you can't reach that unless you live in a place where you don't have access to those foods is actually quite hard to do. Like it's hard to not do that. So yeah, that's one of the other things that really, I guess, changed the journey.
I love that concept of making it so easy and small that it's like it would be ridiculous if you couldn't do it. That's really, really great. And I think I'm going to steal that from you. And I have to laugh because I asked you what eating habit you changed to reverse your prediabetes, and your answer was I ate ice cream every day. So I was expecting you to say I cut out sugar, I cut out gluten or carbs or whatever. Because as someone who has studied a lot of this as well myself, like that's what I've been taught. So is there like a specific diet that you went with or that you coach people on? Like what's the actual food?
So when you mentioned cutting out sugar, that was actually what focused on. And when I did say ice cream, that was only in the first week to get over that, like that mind, I guess, obstacle of I'm going to have to restrict. But realistically, for pre-diabetes, in my specific situation, cutting out sugar was the best option because I had a bit of a sugar addiction, and removing the sugar just meant that I could regulate what I ate so much more. When I coach people, I don't usually have like a specific diet because everyone is different. Everyone's bodies react differently to different foods, different types of foods, so I don't necessarily like promote a particular style of eating. However, there are some general rules that I always kind of try and put into place if it works with someone's lifestyle. And one of them is cutting out sugar, especially in the initial phases. So, especially when they have medical conditions like diabetes, because sugar is addictive. It's actually almost 10 times more addictive than narcotics. Like they've done studies to show that in the brain, that produces the same effect as drugs. So yeah, like it's
I
a
mean, I
big
believe
thing.
it totally. Absolutely.
So it's definitely one of those things that when you cut it out, it becomes very beneficial. But I really want to clarify here, when I say quitting sugar, I don't actually mean natural sugar. So fruits, dates, anything where you can eat the natural source of the food and you get all those other benefits like increased fiber, increased hydration, all the vitamins and minerals that you need. Those things are not cutting out sugar. In fact, that's what I suggest as the substitute for processed sugar. And I think that's where a lot of people, it again takes away that restriction because we're not taking away everything sweet in life. It's more you're adding in more of the good things, the good sugars, and then taking away all the processed sugar where you can't really recreate that sugar in your home. You know what I mean? Like it's usually made in a factory. And those kind of sugars is what I cut out completely. And you know what? When you make the habit change on a mindset level, sometimes making that action change is really not that hard.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Like So I love that you said dates, by the way, because I have such a date addiction. Like those medjool dates from Whole Foods are so good. I'll sit there and eat like 10 of them, and my husband's like, "Those have so much sugar." So I appreciate the permission. I'm gonna say that you gave me permission from now on when he gives me a hard time. And I love that you don't cut out fruit because a lot of people do. And I know it's high in sugar, but I also am like, if nature made it, it can't be that bad, right? Like we're meant to eat foods from nature. So I appreciate, I'm sure everything in moderation still, but I appreciate that outlook. Okay, so you've talked about mindset a few times now. Like how does your mindset affect your eating habits, I guess is where we'll start.
That's a very broad question. Yes, it affects it on so many levels. So the way you think about food, first of all, is going to affect what the food does in your body. Did you know? I actually went to a workshop on this recently and it was really cool. So, your microbiome, which is like all the good bacteria that's sitting in your gut, has a huge effect on how you digest and extract nutrients from food.
Sure.
And just taking deep belly breaths can actually change your gut microbiome within 4 to 6 weeks. So it can change the like type of food that you prefer and how you digest food within 4 to 6 weeks. I find that so fascinating. So I just thought
Wow,
I'd
that
share
is
that quickly.
so fascinating. That's
Right?
amazing. What's the science behind that? Do you know?
So the science is basically your microbiome adjusts itself based on what you're eating. So when you take deep belly breaths, first of all, you're promoting mindful eating. And that actually allows you to really taste the food and really see what the effect of that food is on your body. So that generally tends to lead to people wanting more of the things that are more nutritious. So that and then in within 4 to 6 weeks, what ends up happening is your microbiome slowly adjusts to actually prefer those foods over the like processed foods that you might have been eating before. And like I just find it really fascinating that 4 to 6 weeks is not that long of a time.
Oh.
And it can feel like forever when you're doing it, but at the end of that, you're like basically you've got a whole new like bacterial colony in your stomach, which is amazing. Um, I'm a bit of a nerd in this sense. I get really excited about this.
I'm such a nerd too, and that's so fascinating. And you and I were just chatting right before this that we both have like young babies, and like so my kid was a baby, and so I'm thinking about his gut microbiome a lot. Like I just bought one of those like tiny health kits to test his gut microbiome, and knowing that it can change, like not obviously as an infant, but that we can change our gut microbiome gives me that like a lot of peace of mind, right? Because I'm like, oh, I don't want him to have a bad start in life, right? Because his gut isn't right because he didn't come out vaginally, right? So I'm just thinking about that. I appreciate that. Okay, so talk to me more about how your mindset affects the foods that you eat because that's so fascinating.
Okay, so first of all, the thing you tell yourself about the food, like I mentioned, changes how your body processes it. But it also changes, I guess, how you approach food in general. Let me give you an example. So if you're constantly telling yourself, I can't resist sugar, I'm just not a healthy eater, I just, I just love food too much to ever be someone who can cut out all those foods, you're already setting yourself up to be that person.
Yeah.
So you're telling yourself a story that this is who I am, and what's going to happen is your brain wants to make you happy. That like your brain is going to do everything in its power to make that a reality. So just by changing the words you're saying to yourself, that can lead to a massive change. And it seems like such a simple thing. And so many people will say, like, oh, that's absolutely not possible. I agree that it's not possible overnight. It is definitely not possible overnight. But the more and more you tell yourself who you want to be in a way that's actually aligned with what you want, for example, I am a healthy eater, I will choose food that nourish my body. I really enjoy vegetables and fruits. And that's one that people are so resistant to, but it's like a game changer. But once you change that story, you'll start noticing that you naturally start noticing the food that actually aligns with that vision. So, and it sounds crazy, right? Like it sounds like, how will I ever find fruit and vegetable so appealing that that's what I choose over the, hot chips and I can't even think of something now. Burger. But it's happened. Like I had a situation where I was out. I went on like an overnight trip with friends, and this was probably like 8 or 9 weeks into my quitting sugar and changing my eating habits journey. And I remember it was like there's so much junk food, and I was on holiday, so I was like, yes, I'm just gonna go for it. And about a day in, I was like, I need some vegetables. Like, I cannot do this. I can't just keep filling my body with this. And it wasn't even like oh, this is bad for me. This is like, I am craving a vegetable right now. So I went out and bought like a cucumber and just was munching on that. And in my head, I was like, is this real? Like, is this happening? Because like, like what, 2 months ago, this would not be the case. I would be like chowing down on that and just be so happy that I can, eat whatever I want. So it really does affect your brain, the what you tell yourself. So I think it does take time. And I think 4 to 6 weeks is a good time period to give yourself, but it 100% can. And the way you do it is you just choose who you want to be, and then just start telling yourself what would actually benefit that.
I mean, I love that. You heard me talk about my book. It's called Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. And literally, this is what I talk about also, just in such a broader sense than just food. But of course, it would work for food if it works for anything, right? Like anything you say after the words I am, you're going to manifest as a reality in your life. And I've never thought about it in this sense with food, but like, of course it works, right? So you said something interesting. You said, how you think about food affects how your body processes it. So, talk to me a little bit about that because that sounds really fascinating too.
Okay. Have you ever thought of something really delicious like a piece of cake, and then you notice your hands start tingling and your mouth starts like filling with saliva, and all you can think about is eating that cake?
Like right now,
That,
yeah.
yes. That's what I mean. The way you think about food and what you feel and tell yourself about food can actually bring about physical changes in your body. And there have been studies to show that if you think about something in a positive light, then your body is actually going to have the same effect as if you were eating it. So even if you're not eating it, if you think like, oh my gosh, I am craving that piece of cake, I can almost taste it in my mouth. Well, your body's actually going to react as if you're eating it. On the flip side, if you think like, oh, I'm really low on energy, I just want something that's going to give me heaps of energy, and you start really imagining what you're going to eat that's going to give you that energy, you'll start noticing an uplift in your energy. It's actually a technique called mental rehearsal, and I love it because I actually talk about this in like a couple of videos and things like that. But mental rehearsal is one of those techniques where if you use that and you can really imagine what you're putting in your body that's benefiting you, you're actually convincing your brain that it's already happened, which is really cool, right? Like it's basically like experiencing something twice, but you're not actually even experiencing it. So that's a really great tool to use, especially in the beginning, because it kind of trains your brain like, this is actually what I want. It's not the things that I was telling you before. It's this new thing that I really, really want, and I'm going to give you as much exposure to it as possible.
That's really cool. I know I've heard of mental rehearsal for sports players or for musicians, right? Where they've actually done tests where people just pretending to play the piano or doing it in their mind or moving their fingers have like learned pieces and even excelled further than people who practice it, right? Um, okay, so funny question that popped up. Can you convince yourself that that piece of cake you're going to eat is actually healthy and it will give you the same benefits as a vegetable?
You can. I hope no one takes offense to this, but your brain is pretty dumb sometimes. You can really tell it anything and it will believe you. Your brain doesn't have the, I guess, exposure to the external world that you have. And of course, like intellectually you can know something, but you have to remember that a lot of the body systems work on emotion, because emotion is energy. So if you attach an emotion to a particular food, absolutely you can convince your brain, you can convince yourself anything, you can convince yourself that like chocolate cake is the best thing in the world for you, and your brain's going to believe it. But the problem with doing that is once you do that, it's very hard to reverse it, because as well as making you happy, the brain also wants to make sure you stay alive and functioning the best you can. So if you're telling yourself, oh, this is the best thing I can eat, when you go to then reverse that and say this is not the best thing, your brain's going to be like, well, you just spent however long telling me that this is the healthiest food I can eat. So now you have to convince me that that's not the healthiest food. And that's actually where another technique comes in, using imagery and again, changing the words you're saying to yourself to reverse those ideas. And again, it's so possible. It's just about repetition.
Yeah, so fascinating. Okay, so you were saying that emotion ties into everything, right? So if you're eating that piece of cake and you're feeling negative emotions, you're feeling regret about it, or you're feeling guilty, or you're feeling shameful, what is that going to do to your body?
So those emotions, first of all, they're kind of like the overlying symptoms. So those emotions, first of all, are going like, sorry, not first of all, but those emotions, they basically make you feel bad about yourself. But unfortunately, they're not really great motivators. So all three of those things that you just mentioned, they will signal that there's something wrong in your body. But underlying all that, there might be this idea that cake or chocolate gives me excitement. It makes me feel excited. And the problem is you're layering negative emotions on top of a really strongly ingrained positive one. So even though you feel all this like shame and disgust with yourself, underlying that, you're still feeling like this cake is making me feel excited. And so your body's going to say, oh, well, if you're feeling all those things, let's get out of that and make you feel excited and put more cake in there. So you see how this can be like a really big I call it my the shame binge cycle for that reason, because you're really eliciting feelings that aren't great, but unfortunately the only way your brain knows how to repair that is to go back to the original action. So it's really like a cycle there that really needs to be broken.
I mean, that totally makes sense why people might be overeating or binge eating and feel really shitty about it, but they keep going, right? That totally makes sense. So are all of these things drawn from your past experiences, right? Because like what I teach is like your belief system is so ingrained from your past experiences, the opinions of other people, like all this cultural conditioning that happened as a child usually. So like how does that all play into your food habits?
It plays in like so strongly. Food is essential for life, right? So you can't ever cut it out. And any association you have with food is usually formed by the time you're 10 to 15. So before you're even like considered an adult, all your food associations are usually in place. And of course you can reverse them, but it takes conscious thought and effort. But the problem is once you start functioning on that outdated belief system, in the future, you find it really hard to break it because you're not changing any of the underlying beliefs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you said age 10 to 15, like I think about people who develop eating disorders or just disordered eating of any kind, right? So I know a lot of that does tend to happen in high school, but like what about when that comes into play past that mark? Like how does like talk to me about that a little bit.
So eating disorders are a bit different. Eating disorders usually come from the idea that food is I guess, cure for some other traumatic emotional experience. And it it's a very serious thing, but unfortunately, without fixing the underlying problem, the food is actually just a symptom in those cases. The food, like restriction, is, for example, in anorexia, restriction is the symptom of not feeling like you're good enough and not feeling like you'll ever live up to the expectations of the people around you. And that's obviously a very basic, simplified way of looking at it. But all eating disorders usually come down to an underlying idea about your sense of worth and your sense of identity. And unless that's addressed, the food habits are just going to keep coming up the same way because they're, again, like they're just a symptom. They're not really, they're like a band-aid for what is actually going on.
Yeah, totally. I think I've also heard that disordered eating, it's like something you can control when you're feeling out of control, right? When something is out of control in your life, it's like, well, at least I can control this, like this small little piece of my world, right? I can control what goes into my mouth or what doesn't go into my mouth. Um, okay, so I have to ask, because you have this pharmaceutical background, like how has all of this changed your view of the pharmaceutical industry, right? Because, so often we hear that we have to take drugs to reverse these kind of things, but you can do it with eating. So what did that do with your view? And are you still a pharmacist?
I am still a pharmacist.
Okay.
Absolutely. I love pharmacy. It's part of my passion. I really love the health industry in general. But here's the thing. I don't disagree with taking medication. I disagree with the idea of taking medication as the cure all. Okay?
Mhm.
So right now, and specifically in the idea of weight loss, there's this a drug called Ozempic. It's taking the world by storm. Everyone seems to love it or hate it. Like have a strong opinion. The thing is, Ozempic is just a tool. It's just a tool to be used in the way that will benefit your body. The issue comes in when people don't they use it as like this is the easy way out, and they don't actually make the habit changes that would take them further in life. And that's where I really find there's an issue with taking medication, because in any condition, if you take medication and you don't make the changes in your lifestyle and your mindset, that medication is a lifelong medication, and it is a band-aid fix. And you're band-aid fixing something that you could actually change with some simple actions. And I think that's where people make a lot of, I guess, They're stuck in this situation. And to be honest, like like I said, I don't disagree with taking medication, but I just can't. For me personally, I really don't like relying on other things, and I'm a little bit weird because I do like taking the hard road as well. The easy road is never. I always like take the stairs. I always like try and find the complicated way to do something, especially physically or like in the habits area, because I know that it's going to benefit me down the long track. But not everyone knows that, and so taking medication, you can absolutely do it, but I would really strongly advise, as a pharmacist and a healthy eating coach, like make the underlying change, because otherwise you're just going to be in this position where you're relying on something else to live a good quality of life.
Yeah, I like that idea because so often in the spiritual community, it's like you can heal yourself, like everything comes from your mind and your emotions, and you know, drugs are bad, but there's kind of a time and a place for everything, right? Like not everything about Western medicine is bad, right? Like if I break my arm, like going to the hospital helps. And I could see that as like a tool that people abuse, right? Or that people just put all of their egg basket and think, okay, this is what's going to fix me. I don't have to do the work. Um, no, I appreciate that. It made me think that, like, does our mindset affect how the drugs interact with our body then too? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The placebo effect is a real thing. If you're taking something and you believe it's going to work, of course, your body is going to react to that and do everything in its power to make it work. That's not always the case. There are going to be obviously some cases where your body really doesn't want to take that medication, and it rejects it in some way, shape, or form, side effects. But for the most part, what you believe affects how your body is going to react to something. And that is not just with medication, that's with everything, right? But with medication, if you believe something is going to work, your body is going to respond to it so much better. And you can see this from like medication, like just paracetamol, which I think in where you are is acetaminophen or Tylenol, like those kind of ones, to like cancer medications. There's a reason why alongside of the medication, doctors will also talk about the idea of really believing that your body is capable of changing, your body is capable of recovering, because the more you can accept that, embrace that idea of your body being well, the more your body's going to try and make that a reality.
I have not heard many doctors over here anyway. Where are you located, by the way?
Australia.
Okay. So I've not heard many doctors in the US talk about mindset or really believing it. And it's good to hear that in other places they are. They need to catch up over here. Okay. So what do you think the placebo effect is as a pharmacist?
So the placebo effect is your brain will affect how your body reacts to something. That's the way, like, that's a very simplified way of saying it. But if the placebo effect can be used in so many ways, like, there's a book about it. I have it on my bookshelf. You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, I love that book.
And yeah, he talks about how like your mind and your thoughts can make things happen that you would only expect to happen by medication or by like, psychedelics or doing some transcendental experience. So but I've tried this out so much. Like when I was a really young kid, I used to practice this because I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I also like experimenting. So I'm kind of like, I'm going to experiment with this. And I remember when I was 10 years old, I was like, I want to see if I can reverse my anger by just changing how I think about something. And it worked. Like it was so crazy, but I wasn't changing anything about my external world. I was literally just changing the way I reacted to something. And I think that is also part of the placebo effect because you're changing your reaction to something based on the thoughts and the feelings you're having towards something. So I think, yeah, placebo effect is so real and it can be applied to so many areas of life. It's just about finding that right balance of what can I really convince my brain of without all the external chatter coming in and unconvincing me of that.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, you're totally talking my language. Literally, my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality, is about how if you shift your perspective and look at something from another point of view, you can completely change your life. And that means not being angry about something. So I want to hear how you reverse that or how you were able to do that yourself when you were experimenting. And then, oh my gosh, you just said something so genius that I had a question about. What was the last thing you said? Oh my gosh. Do you remember what it was?
Uh,
No?
it
Okay.
was, it'll come, it'll come.
It'll come.
Um,
Tell me that first.
so when I was younger, anger is an emotion, and anger is really interesting actually because it's where your boundaries get crossed, and there's this really great philosophical principle called the ladder of fall, and it's something that has fascinated me my whole life since I heard it. It's basically where when you get angry, you go through a series of processes and you lose all sense of discrimination. And that is why in anger, you react in a way that most people say like you're reacting from your truest self, but really it's actually from your animal self because you're reacting with instinct rather than with discrimination, which is really what separates humans from animals. So that's the principle that I really love. And when I heard it, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and apply this. And whenever I got angry, instead of reacting, I would actually just stop, walk away from the situation, take a few deep breaths, and then start using my sense of discrimination. Did someone really do that to upset me? What were they, where were they coming from? And there's a great fictional book called Something Borrowed. It was made into a movie, but it's really good. If you read the book, she talks about how she gives the other person a jewelry in her head. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to do that. So I ended up starting to give the other person a jewelry. And when I was angry about something, I'd be like, okay, if I was in a law court, what would they be saying right now as evidence that they weren't trying to make me angry? And I know it sounds really complicated. And I do sound like I'm talking to myself a lot, but I do actually do that. Like that, unfortunately, is just how I function. I love talking to myself, not in a crazy way, but like just mentally. And by actually seeing the other side and seeing the other's perspective, a lot of the time the anger just went away because someone was never trying to hurt me. They were just reacting the way they reacted. And I use that up until today. And there are very few times I will react out of anger in a way that harms or hurts anyone else for that reason, because I have kind of trained my brain to say, well, if I'm angry, a boundary of mine has been crossed. I don't want to descend into that space where I just act out of instinct and I'm, trying to, I guess, attack like a tiger. Like I don't want to attack like a tiger. I want to sit and I want to think and then respond in a way that's going to diffuse the situation. So I guess that's a really complicated way of answering your question, but that's how I deal with that.
I love that answer. Thank you so much. And I think it's so genius. And by the way, talking to yourself is totally a great thing because we're all thinking trillions of thoughts every day, right? And psychologists even say 90% of our thoughts are negative and repetitive. So what you're doing is you're breaking that cycle, and you're saying like, wait, I want to actually look at my thoughts and figure out, like, is this serving me right now? So I think that's so genius. I mean, if people don't take away anything else from this episode, I hope they take away that, because it's just, it'll completely change your life, like it has for you. So what else have we not touched on that you think is really important for people to know?
I'd really like to talk about how motherhood can affect habit change, because both you and I are new mothers, and I think there are a lot of new mothers out there who could really benefit from that, if that's something you would like.
Yeah. Tell me how motherhood affected your habits.
Okay, so first of all, as a mother, it's so easy to get sucked into this motherhood journey. And I think a lot of people lose their identity, they lose their space to be themselves. And one of the ways that they can regain that in a really small sense is just by deciding what kind of person they want to be, and then showing up as that person in small ways. And I'm not talking about like new mothers in the first 6 weeks, because you're right, like I still have mum brain, so
That's
I know
survival
what
mode
it's
for sure.
like, yeah. But after that, I think it's really important to recognize that you have this a great opportunity, because as a mother, you are able to change who you are in front of someone who has no idea who you are. They are
Mhm.
not familiar with you in any sense other than the like maternal child sense. Like you have that bond. They don't know anything about the world. And they are going to take all their cues from you. So this is like a perfect opportunity for you to shape the way you want to be in the future in the smallest possible sense. And that's such a cool, like amazing feeling. So as a new mother, you're in the like early stages of motherhood, and I'm sure you kind of have that overwhelming sense of responsibility towards your child. I know I did. I felt like I have to be the best version of myself. And in the beginning, that actually caused a lot of stress, because I was like, oh my gosh, my baby's watching everything I'm doing. Then I have to keep reminding myself, even now, she's 1.5, but I have to keep reminding myself, she has no idea. So whatever I do, I get to redo it tomorrow, and I can say that's the real way you're supposed to do it. I get to redo it the next day and the next day. And that's a great opportunity, right? Because you can just practice what you want to do. It's not about being perfect. You don't have to be perfect about it. But you can recreate what you want to do and recreate who you want to be. And I specifically like doing this with the eating space, because there's this idea that in motherhood, we just eat whatever's left over from our kid. And we don't really have the space to make our own meals and enjoy our own food. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this really great meme where it's like, I understand now why the mama bear's food in Goldilocks was cold and the dada bear's food in Goldilocks was hot.
That's funny. I like that.
um, but the reality is, you can make whatever you want and eat it. And even though it seems like that kid is you have to make separate food for the kid and you have to do all this stuff, reality is, at the end of the day, they're going to see what you're eating and they're going to want that.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've started eating like something that I really wanted and my kid's like, I'll take that. It happened a lot with peaches, which I'm absolutely obsessed with, and I was a
My
little bit,
favorite.
I was happy but also a little bit sad, because I was like, she's eating all my peaches. um but like, I think it's just a really great opportunity, and I think people lose sight of that in this idea that you have to feed your kid in a particular way, and unfortunately that means making 2 meals, but you can just feed your kid in the way that nourishes their body but also helps you like demonstrate to yourself that this is who I want to be. I want to be someone who eats really healthy food, or I want to be someone who nourishes my body with the food that actually benefits me. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. You can still eat the food that you really enjoy that might not be as nourishing, but I think that's the way I see motherhood. Like, it's a really just great opportunity to practice and repeatedly practice in front of someone who they're learning, but they also don't have this idea of the world. So if you make a mistake, you can just redo it the next day and they're probably just going to be like, oh yeah, that's probably the new way. So yeah.
I like that for so many reasons. And you've said a lot of things, and I have a lot of things to say too, because I really, really appreciate what you just said. And, so many people, like you said, lose their identity in motherhood, or they're like, oh, my life is over, or like they prioritize themselves the lowest, right, out of everyone else. And thinking about it, or if you're not a mother, any big change that you've gone through, there's always two ways to look at things, right? This is what we've been talking about. You can change your perspective and completely change your life. You can look at it as a victim, right? Or you can be like, wow, this is a really cool opportunity to reinvent myself. This is a really cool new start of an adventure, right? Like, I get to be whoever I want to be. And I don't know about you, but my kid makes me want to be a better person. Like, I feel like I have so much to learn from him already. He's 17 weeks. He wakes up with this huge grin on his face every single day. He's like the happiest, smiliest boy. And I'm like, man, I want to wake up every day with this huge grin on my face and just be like, wow, it's a brand new day. I'm here in this body on earth, right? Like, and it's a new adventure. And I love your perspective on that. And then as far as what you were talking about with the two meals, I when I was pregnant, I read one book, and it was Bringing Up Bebe. I don't know if you read that, but it's all about the French style of bringing up your children versus like the American. And one thing I really took from it is like, make your kid fit into your life rather than the other way around, right? And it goes for everything. And I think food's a really big thing, right? Like, you can puree anything, right? Like you really can make whatever you're going to have for dinner, and then just make it kid friendly too for them, right? Because I mean, A, they're going to get nourishment. B, they're going to have a much better palate, right? They're not going to be as picky. Like you said, they're going to want to eat what you eat. And it goes for everything with kids. Like, I see so many people out here just over scheduling their kids like crazy, right? Like, they're in every damn activity, and the parents' life has just become like carpooling them from like place to place. And it's like, kids can be bored sometimes. Like, I'm literally going up to Napa, which is the wine country, tomorrow, and I'm bringing my 17-week-old, right? I'm going with my mom who's in town, and my in-laws and my husband, and like, I'm probably not going to drink. I'm going to be the driver. It's 45 minutes from my house, but we're going to go out to dinner, and we're going to go to a couple of wineries, and it's beautiful up there, and it's a gorgeous day. We're bringing the dogs, and like, it doesn't have to be like all kid stuff, right? And I just, there's ways to fit them into your life. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I love that. I was lucky in that I never had this idea that I had to give up everything for my kid.
Yeah.
And so there's a big part of me that tries to fit her into my life, but in a way that I guess she enjoys it as well. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important to remember with kids, like, generally they'll just enjoy anything. Like, it's always about that idea that they're learning and they're growing. And at this age, like when they're so young, they don't know any better. Like, I know it sounds so mean, but they really don't. If you go to the shops, like, I pretty much use every opportunity of my everyday life, anything that I'm doing, as an opportunity for her to have fun. And for me, that's enough. Like, I don't have to take her to special things. And on the flip side of that, I also use it as an opportunity to learn from her, exactly like you said, and like view my world through her eyes. Like, oh my god, grocery shopping is super fun because I can just chuck stuff in a trolley. Walking around, there's so much to see, and there's so much fascinating things. And so that's the way I approach motherhood, really. I try to learn from her as much as I can, but I'm also trying to teach her, like, this is how you can live your best life. And I guess, yeah, like, to your point, I think I love the idea that your kid wakes up with a grin on his face. I was like, oh, I need to learn that bit. I don't know how to do that yet. Like, I'm always like, snooze.
Right. And they have so much to teach us, right? Like, everyone you meet in life is your teacher, and especially the people in your immediate circle. And I like that idea of, as long as your kid is having fun too, and just bringing play back into life. Like, kids help you relive your childhood, right? Like, it's pretty special. And it seems like a theme in your life, right? Like you try and gamify things, you try and make things fun. And it made me realize like we didn't even talk about how you gamify the food thing. So can we get back to that? I wanna hear like how you gamify other things because I really like that you have that like lightness about you, right? Like you try and make things fun and life is fun, right? Like we don't have to hold it so heavy. It can be a really fun adventure to be here.
Yeah, 100%. I like play is the foundation of me, really. Like I try and make everything fun. And the way I do that with healthy eating habits is just really just adding I'm a big gamer. So board games, video games, escape rooms, anything, right? So I just take elements from those and I add them to my healthy eating journey. That's actually how I made it one of the ways I made it sustainable in the beginning is I started setting myself challenges. And it wasn't necessarily with other people because I found with other people I would kind of give myself cheat days because, you know, when you're with someone else, you have that sense of solidarity. And if they're not achieving their goals, then sometimes you feel like, okay, it's okay for me not to. Sometimes
Yeah.
it was just with myself. But putting challenges in place, giving myself rewards, this is a huge part of any habit change, but specifically with healthy eating, rewarding yourself in a non-food way can be an absolute game changer. And also just finding ways to experiment and make it fun. So one of the really like small easy ways that I do it is I have this goal of mindful eating, and I love mindful eating, but it's something I have struggled with a lot in my life. And so instead of making it mindful eating, I have to eat mindfully every day. I have to eat without distraction. I have a little spinning wheel. You know, one of those like spinning wheels you get on like Temu and all those, you know, sites where you can get 20% off. I have that for eating. And so I basically have put like 5 spokes in different aspects of like mindful eating, and every day I get to choose a different aspect just by spinning my wheel. And it's such an easy simple way to do it. There are so many apps out there that can do it for you, but it just adding that tiny element of fun makes it feel like, oh, it's so exciting, like I'm adding something into my journey that makes it a little bit less mundane and a little bit more exciting. And so that's just the way I use gamification. I think everyone has their own fun style, so it's really important for me specifically to take that into account because not everyone is going to find the same things fun. And and I'm all about making it super personalized and super tailored. So using people's individual fun styles means that we can create like a whole eating, I guess, journey that is so specific and so fun for that person. So yeah.
What a great attitude to go through life with. And the wheel with the spokes is so fun. So, for people who don't even know what mindful eating is, like tell me a few things on the spokes. Like what are your options each day?
So I've got chew slowly. So just as an overview, mindful eating is eating while you're completely present on the food that you're eating. So using all your senses and trying to eliminate any distractions so that when you nourish your body with the food you're eating, you can, first of all, find out where you're full. You can make your own hunger fullness scale and actually adhere to it. And just doing that as a healthy eating change can be like, it can really just move you in the direction you want to go so fast. So some of my spokes are, like I said, chewing mindfully or chewing slowly. I think it was the exact thing was chewing 10 times per bite. And then no distractions was one. What was another one? Sure, I have it somewhere. Anyway, those two are one of like some of them. And then also um using my senses. So I have actually one spoke for each sense, like really hearing my food and observing exactly what I hear when I eat. And it sounds crazy, like some food doesn't have any sound, but actually it does, and it's something that we just completely overlook. So it's not always the obvious things, it's sometimes just these really subtle things, but just focusing on that particular part of it can just change a whole eating experience as well. It's kind of like eating at a fine dining restaurant, but having like pasta or like, meat and vegetables. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like making your eating into a meditation. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Okay, so you mentioned non-food rewards. What are some rewards that you like to give yourself?
So for me, I like to give myself an afternoon off from everything. I'll go for a walk, and I'll have like a phone-free walk, which is not something I get often. But big rewards can be like going on holiday. So we've already kind of decided in 5 years we're going to go back to Europe and go to Naxos, which is in Greece. And that's something that I guess for us is a massive reward. So it can be as small as an hour to yourself. It can be as like, medium-sized thing would be like a new item of clothing or a new tech item that you really want, but you're saving it for a time when you feel like maybe you deserve it or when it's really going to benefit your life. Use that as a reward. So it can be anything, but I usually steer people away from food-related rewards because there's nothing worse than having like a great week where you hit all your goals and then being like, okay, I'm going to go and binge on like a piece of cake or, something like that. That's a problem because then you're, first of all, reversing it. You're giving your brain really confusing signals and your brain really likes clear signals. So you want to just stick to whatever you told your brain, keep reinforcing that. So you want really, I guess, non-food related rewards, but something that is appealing to you specifically.
Okay, so that's great. So it has nothing to do with the scale though, right? It has nothing to do with like, once I hit this weight or once I reverse this thing, like it's about sticking to your goals, right? Or hitting that next level in your game.
I love that you said next level in your game. So, next level can mean anything. Look, you can use weight as I guess, tracking. It's not the best because I think people put a lot of store in weight. And yes, it is definitely important, but weight's not the be all and end all. And so even though that could be one level, like, oh, I lose 5 kilos, I get to the next level, I wouldn't suggest using weight as your only tracker. So if you're going to extend, like go to like through levels, use different measures as your levels. So one level that I personally use is, how do I feel in my body? How do I fit into my clothes? So that's if, I'm feeling really great and I fit into all my clothes. And as a mum specifically, when you get to that place where you can fit into your old clothes, oh my God, the feeling is just off the charts. Like you just feel like, oh, I'm back to normal. I'm back to being me.
I'm waiting for that moment. I can't wait to get it.
Oh, you will. Trust me, you will. I know you will. But yeah, so that like non-weight ones as well are really good to advance your levels. But you get to choose that. You get to choose what your levels are. You get to choose, what is going to make you feel like you're progressing. Sometimes that is going to be weight, of course. Like that is a really important measure, but it's important to make it really holistic and just, how do I feel about my body? One level could be like, I feel absolutely amazing about myself right now. And that's not something you can tangibly measure, but when you wake up in the morning, you could wake up feeling like, I am winning today, So yeah, it's different for everyone. And I suggest you choose things that I guess you have to work on, and that winning that particular thing would just make your healthy eating journey just completely different. And you feel like you've advanced as a person and as an eater.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of this. I can't believe an hour has flown by. I love this conversation. I'm all about mindset, as I've told you. And, sometimes we forget to put that on every single aspect of our lives, right? So I've never really thought about it in the sense of eating. So thank you so much. This was really enlightening. So for listeners who want to hear more, they want to connect with you, they want to know how they can work with you, tell us where we can find you, what you're up to.
So I run workshops every month on different topics, but related to the healthy eating space. And you'll find me on like Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn for those. I also have a YouTube channel. So if you're just looking for general information about healthy eating, how to make it fun, or just like even like the latest scientific data or something about a medication, that's where I usually post like my informational videos. And I also have like a really great quiz on my website where you can find your own fun style and like actionable ways to apply that to your own journey.
Nice.
So yeah, and like a newsletter that I send out weekly as well. So there's quite a few ways to reach me, but in general, I just really love giving you tips and tricks to move you forward in your own journey. So yeah, check those out and see how you go.
Awesome. And all of your links will be in the show notes. So if you're listening, that's where you'll find them. Sandhya, thank you so much for coming. It was such a pleasure to get to talk to you for an hour. If you're listening and this episode resonated, please like, share, subscribe. Like, definitely send it to someone you think could use it. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Have a beautiful rest of your day.